It is hot out there. In just a few minutes, President Biden will try to shift the focus from the investigations into his family to his economic agenda by selling Bidenomics to voters in Maine. The president tried to turn the page after a bombshell court hearing for his son Hunter, and as a Republican effort to launch an impeachment inquiry into him looms in the background. Karl Rove is a former White House deputy chief of staff and a Fox News contributor. So, Karl, the president tried to change the subject this afternoon, but after what happened with this plea deal and what we learned from the plea deal, that's a big hill for him to try to climb.
Absolutely. The president does have a big bully pulpit, but this is a big issue, and it's not going to go away quickly. Having said that, the Republicans have got to be very careful about this. We saw the political impact of overreach in 1998, where all the attacks on Bill Clinton resulted in the Democrats gaining seats in the midterm election, not losing seats. And similarly, if the Republicans overreach on this, that is to say, jump to conclusions too quickly, without a lot of evidence being built up to support those conclusions, it could be hurtful to them in the 2020 presidential race.
But at the same time, the flip side of that coin is the Department of Justice is going after the president so hard. I mean, do the two things kind of cancel each other out?
Well, to some degree they do. They cause both sides to sort of, go to their corners. But my point about the Biden the talk about a Biden impeachment is it's premature. We need to know more. We need to hear from Devon Archer. Even if he makes accusations about President Biden, we need to make certain that those are firmed up and backed up with evidence. We need corroboration, if you will, on these things. The Republicans would be better off saying, we want to investigate this and get to the bottom of things and pay attention to each of those steps before they start talking about the I word.
Devon Archer expected to give testimony before the committee on Monday. How big do you expect that could be, Karl?
Well, it could be very big. This is the business partner of Hunter Biden. Remember, in January of 2014, Devon Archer, who is a very long-standing relationship with the then Secretary of State John Kerry, sort of a political bag man, close associate of John Kerry's, and business partner to Hunter Biden. Devon Archer goes on the board of Burisma, this corrupt Ukrainian company, and it is he who suggests several months later that his business partner, Hunter Biden, joined the board as well. This is that while Hunter Biden's father, then Vice President Joe Biden, is in charge of the Obama administration's efforts to encourage Ukraine to crack down on corruption, and his son has just gone on the board of one of the big targets of the corruption efforts in Ukraine, a company whose CEO was forced to flee the country and go into exile in Dubai because the authorities wanted to get a hold of him and talk to him about a lot of the corrupt practices that Burisma was involved in.
Karl, I mentioned we learned a lot from reading through the plea deal. You also learned a lot from reading through the transcript of the court proceeding, including just how much money Hunter Biden made from his business dealings with China, which stands in sharp contradiction to this moment from the 2020 debate when President Biden said this. He said, my son has not made money in terms of this thing about, what are you talking about, China? The only guy who made money from China is this guy, points to Donald Trump. He's the only one. Nobody else has made money from China. That statement, Karl, did not have the added benefit of being true. And the president has said a lot of things about Hunter Biden, including, I never talked to him about his business dealings. And now the White House is saying the president was never in business with his son. Does Biden have a lot of statements hanging out there that could come back to bite him as this election campaign really gets underway?
Oh, absolutely. And what the amazing one is, I never talked to my son about his business dealings. Well, first of all, I don't believe that. But if it's true, that's even more damning in a way. He should have been talking to his son. He should have said to his son, I heard you joined the board of this company in Ukraine. You have no background in Ukraine, no background in corporate governance, and nothing in energy, which is what this company is all about. And besides that, it's a corrupt company that we're encouraging the Ukrainian government to crack down on. Son, you need to get off that board. Now, he had to have known about it. It was a public issue. It was made public in May with a news release and coverage in this country that if the vice president did not talk to his son is damning. I mean, it's like, go do anything you want to use the name Biden to enrich yourself. but I'm not going to bother telling you if it's a bad idea. That's horrific. And remember this: the investigation of Hunter Biden was delayed. We now know by the whistleblowers so long that Hunter Biden didn't have to pay back taxes on his earnings in 2014 and 2015 from Burisma. So he gets to pocket some of the cash from the corrupt Ukrainian company because the statute of limitations had run out on his failure to pay taxes on it. But yeah, President Biden made a misstatement in that debate. Whether it was deliberate or not, it was inaccurate. And he certainly has made other statements like, "I've never talked to my son about his business dealings," which are troubling if true and troubling if not true.
Next week is going to kick off with a bang. Karl, I hope you make it through the weekend and have a good one. Thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
I'll be on Fox News Sunday, so it'll be a good one.
All right, looking forward to it. Thank you.
Hey everyone, I'm Emily Campagno. Catch me and my co-hosts Harris Faulkner and Kaylee McEnany on Outnumbered every weekday at 12 p.m. Eastern, or set your DVR. Also, don't forget to subscribe to the Fox News YouTube page for daily highlights.